My name is Lena, I'm 33 years old, and I'm a senior marketing analyst at a mid-sized firm in Chicago. My fiancé, Darren, is 35, an architect who finds peace in blueprints and clean lines, always more comfortable with buildings than people. For years, I thought the only thing I had to fight for was my place in a competitive industry. I never imagined the real threat would come from someone sitting across from me every morning smiling with perfect teeth and hidden claws. It started quietly. That's how these things always do. One moment you're in control, and the next, something intangible starts slipping. I noticed it first in meetings. I'd bring up a campaign idea I'd been developing for weeks, and there'd be a pause, just long enough for her to step in. Melanie. She was younger than me, 31, sharp in that polished, Instagrammable way, always one step ahead in style and always one breath behind me in strategy. She'd rephrase my concept just enough to sound new and deliver it with the kind of confidence that made people nod like it was gospel. I used to think I was imagining it. That I was being overly sensitive. That maybe I just wasn't communicating clearly enough. Darren agreed. He said maybe I should speak up more, be more assertive. But how do you speak louder when someone else is already holding the microphone you built? Melanie had only been with the company a year, but she moved fast. Friendly, approachable, always the first to suggest team lunches and the last to leave office parties. She was magnetic in a way that disarmed people. You never saw the game until you were already losing. I told myself she was just ambitious. That there was room for both of us to grow. That our success didn't have to be a zero-sum equation. But then the first real crack showed. A campaign I had poured my soul into, a data-driven strategy that had already started turning early profit, was announced in a company-wide email. Only my name wasn't mentioned. Not once. The credit went to the strategy team, which Melanie now apparently led. I stared at the screen for 10 full minutes, trying to remember if maybe I'd missed a meeting or been transferred without being told. My inbox stayed quiet. My phone didn't ring. No one noticed. Or worse, they noticed and didn't care. I forwarded the email to Darren with a single question mark. He called me and said maybe it was a mistake, or maybe I was overreacting. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Then I sat there and replayed every meeting for the past month, every one-on-one where I'd confided in Melanie about the pitch, the strategy, the analytics, how I planned to present it. All of it. I gave her the playbook and watched her run the game in my jersey. I started watching her more closely after that. There was a pattern. She'd sit in on calls where I did the heavy lifting, then summarize our work in emails to upper management using words like, my team, and, our initiative. I was doing the math. She was cashing the checks. I told Darren again. He was supportive, in theory, but distracted in practice. He had his own deadlines, his own world of steel and glass and clients with impossible budgets. He listened, but he didn't hear it. Not the way I needed him to. The next blow came during the annual review cycle. I'd been quietly prepping for a promotion, director of strategy, a position that had opened up for the first time in 5 years. My manager had hinted I was the top candidate. I spent nights working on a proposal, researching market trends, cross-referencing KPIs, building a vision that could scale. I poured everything into it. Darren even stayed up with me once, helping me lay out the slides, telling me how proud he was. I submitted it 2 days early, hopeful, exhausted, but certain I had earned it. A week later, the announcement came through Slack. Congratulations to Melanie Pierce, our new director of strategy. The blood left my face so quickly I thought I might pass out. I read the message over and over, as if repetition would change the words. My chest felt tight, my fingers numb. People reacted with emojis. Fire. Claps. Balloons. My screen blurred. I didn't respond. I didn't move. Later that day, she stopped by my desk. She smiled, big and bright, like she had just won a raffle. She said she hoped we'd still be able to collaborate closely. That my insights had been so helpful in shaping her vision. I looked at her and said nothing. I didn't trust my voice not to crack. That night, Darren took me out to dinner. I thought maybe it was to console me. Instead, he spent most of the evening talking about a new project at work. When I finally brought it up, he just said, maybe it wasn't meant to be. Maybe Melanie just played the politics better. I didn't even finish my wine. I just asked for the check and drove home in silence. That was the night I realized I was completely alone in a life I had built from the ground up. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Darren snored beside me, and I thought about every moment I had given away. Every secret. Every late-night brainstorm. Every ounce of belief in someone who was quietly sharpening her knife while I handed her the crown. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't cry. I planned. Quietly. Carefully. Because if she wanted the spotlight, I was going to make sure she got it. All of it. Even the parts that burn. The next morning I arrived at the office earlier than usual and sat at my desk with a stillness I hadn't felt in weeks. No anxiety, no anger, just clarity. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it simply Resignation. Inside it I began collecting everything: old emails, meeting notes, drafts, campaign files, screenshots of Slack messages where she referenced work I had done but credited it to herself, and saved versions of our shared presentations with timestamps that proved whose hands had shaped each idea. I wasn't gathering revenge, I was gathering truth. Darren didn't notice the shift in me. He still kissed me on the cheek in the mornings without looking up from his phone, still asked how work was going with that lazy, distracted tone like he was checking off a box. I stopped telling him anything, I stopped expecting him to care. It was easier that way, easier than watching the light leave his eyes every time I spoke about something that mattered to me. The deeper I dug into the folder, the more my stomach turned, not because I found anything surprising but because I had let it go on so long. I saw my name slowly being erased over months from documents I had built from scratch, and I saw her name bloom in its place like rot under paint. I thought of the nights I stayed late finishing quarterly decks while she floated around the office flirting with VPs and making jokes about how bad she was with spreadsheets. I remembered one night in particular, the night she called me her secret weapon. Right after laughing in a room full of men about how analytics make my brain hurt. They all laughed too, of course, but I saw their faces change when she looked at them like that, and I understood that she didn't have to be smarter because she had mastered the art of being seen. I didn't blame her, not really, not anymore. I blamed the room for choosing her shine over my substance. I blamed myself for letting it happen. One afternoon I walked into a meeting where she was presenting a pitch I had created nearly word for word, and something broke open in me. I sat in the back of the room, quiet, invisible, and watched as she stumbled over a key metric and misquoted the engagement projections I had memorized like scripture. I didn't correct her, I didn't flinch, I just watched the VP's face tighten as he realized she didn't actually understand what she was saying. After the meeting he approached me, asked for clarification. And I gave it to him calmly, confidently, without bitterness. He nodded slowly and said, "Interesting." Before walking away I went back to my desk and added one more file to the folder, a voice memo I recorded after that meeting, breaking down the actual numbers side by side with what she'd said. I labeled it for review. It was subtle, it was patient, and it was undeniable. The cracks were beginning to show. I saw it in how she avoided me, how her emails got shorter, colder, how she started calling last minute meetings without me and taking credit for team refinements. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I was methodical. I stopped fighting for what I had already lost and started building the exit that would echo. When I finally requested the HR meeting I was calm, prepared. I laid out everything in clean folders backed with data and timelines. I told them I wasn't interested in retaliation. I wasn't looking for a demotion or to humiliate anyone. I just wanted my departure handled on my terms, and I had one very specific request. I wanted my resignation read aloud by the person who benefited the most from my silence. They asked me to clarify. I said Melanie, and I smiled for the first time in weeks. The days that followed moved with an eerie slowness, like the quiet before a storm. Melanie didn't know anything was coming. I made sure of that. I still showed up to meetings, still shared notes, still smiled when she walked by and said, "Hey team," with that sugary sing-song voice, like she was still starring in a movie that only she believed in. I spent my last week packing up my digital footprint, transferring files to the general drive, clearing my hard drive of anything personal I didn't even tell Darren that I was leaving. I wanted him to find out, like everyone else, like a client waking up to a press release about a failed project. On my last morning I wore my favorite navy dress, the one I had bought when I landed the job years ago. I remembered how powerful I felt in it then, how hopeful I was. I sat at my desk one last time and sent one email with the subject line "Final Request" and attached my resignation letter. I hit send and stood up. My hands didn't shake, my heart didn't race. I had done all the breaking I would ever do in that building. Now I was the storm. Outside the window, fast and clean and full of thunder. From the hallway I watched through the glass as Melanie opened the email. Her brows knit, her smile dropped and her face froze for a full 5 seconds. Then she turned pale and looked toward the conference room. The team was gathering in there, already waiting for the weekly strategy sync, a meeting I had built from scratch and never missed until now. She stood, grabbed the letter and walked slowly into the room. The door clicked shut behind her. I stayed outside listening, my heart beating slow and steady like a drum. "Hi everyone," Melanie began. "I've been asked to read something on behalf of Lena Shaw, who will not be joining us today." Her voice was even, but I saw the tremble in her fingers. She unfolded the letter and read, "Lena has decided to resign from her position effective immediately. Over the past 8 years she has contributed significantly to our growth and innovation. Many of the campaigns we now celebrate were led and developed solely by her vision and dedication. Her resignation is a reflection of not just her personal journey but also of the structural choices we make as a team and a company." There was a silence so loud I could feel it from the hallway. She read the next part slower. "Lena wishes not to name individuals but asks that her silence over the past months be taken as a mirror held up to those who benefit from dimming others to shine." I saw her stop breathing just for a second. Her throat clenched, her hands gripped the paper tighter. She continued, "Lena has asked that this letter serve as both her farewell and her final contribution, a reminder that leadership is not about who speaks loudest in meetings but who listens hardest in hallways, who lifts others even when it goes unseen." When she finished she folded the paper, placed it on the table and sat down. No applause, no comments, just a still room full of blinking eyes and shuffling thoughts. No one looked at her, not really, not like they had before. The air in that room had shifted permanently. I turned and walked out of the building for the last time, not with triumph but with peace, not because I had won but because I had stopped playing the game on their terms. I walked into the street, into the noise of the city, and breathed again, not deeply but freely, like something heavy had finally slipped off my shoulders and vanished into the morning light. I didn't go home right away. I walked for hours through the noise and haze of the city, letting my heels click on the pavement like a metronome to the rhythm of a life I was finally reclaiming. The streets were alive with late morning chaos. Buses groaned at intersections, horns shouted from impatient drivers, and the wind tangled through my hair as if it too was urging me forward. I stopped at a small cafe I used to love before work stole all my mornings and ordered a cappuccino with oat milk. The barista smiled at me like I was just any other woman starting her day, like I didn't just detonate my entire career from the inside. I sat at a corner table sipping slowly, watching strangers move through their routines, and wondered how many of them were sitting on truths they hadn't yet dared to speak. When I got home Darren wasn't there. The apartment was still and echoing. I moved through it carefully like it belonged to someone else, opening drawers, closing closets. My clothes went into 2 suitcases quickly and without ceremony. I left behind the things that no longer felt like mine. The winter coat he bought me that never quite fit, the coffee mugs we argued over at IKEA, the framed photo of us at a company gala. Before I saw him glance at Melanie a moment too long and said nothing out of love or maybe fear. I placed my engagement ring gently on the marble counter beside a folded note. I didn't say much in it. I just wrote, "I needed someone who would see me not just when I'm winning but when I'm fading too, and you couldn't or wouldn't, and I can't wait anymore." I didn't expect a reply. I just needed to leave the truth behind. I moved into a small apartment across the city, high up with big windows and creaky floors, the kind of place where every sound reminded me I was alive. I got a new job at a smaller creative agency, one that didn't have a rooftop bar or cold brew on tap but had something better, respect. My new manager introduced me in meetings as the mind behind several national campaigns and asked real questions about my ideas, not just how fast I could package them. The people there listened, not out of politeness but interest, and every day that passed I felt like I was coming back to myself, cell by cell, heartbeat by heartbeat. It wasn't until a few months later that I got the email. It was short, just one line from a former colleague you probably heard, but Melanie's, under internal review. I stared at the screen for a long moment. My first instinct was to feel nothing, just a cold blank detachment. I closed the laptop and stepped out onto my balcony. The air was warm that day, humming with a late spring breeze, and somewhere below someone was playing jazz. I let the sound fill the quiet corners of my chest. I didn't need the details, I didn't need the satisfaction of knowing exactly what unraveled. I already knew how it started because I'd watched her build her kingdom on stolen ground, and the thing about stolen ground is it eventually gives way. Later that week I received another message, this time from a senior partner who had always been polite but distant. She said she was sorry she hadn't seen what was happening and that she admired how I chose to leave with grace. She asked if I'd consider returning one day, maybe as a consultant, maybe even to lead. I didn't reply right away. I let it sit because part of me felt that old pull, the need to prove myself, to rewrite the ending on their terms, but another part of me, the part that now painted on weekends and walked barefoot across creaky hardwood floors, told me I had already rewritten the ending by walking away at all. I drafted a response and saved it in my drafts, not out of indecision but peace. A week later I ran into Darren at a bookstore. He looked thinner, tired, like he hadn't been sleeping well. We made small talk at first about the weather and mutual friends until he finally said I didn't know it was that bad and I didn't know how to help. I looked at him and smiled, not out of kindness but clarity. I said I didn't need help, I needed a partner, and that's not the same thing. He nodded slowly like he finally understood, then said he hoped I was happy. I said I was learning to be. I still think about that office sometimes, about the way it felt to shrink slowly in a space I helped build, about the way Melanie used charm like armor and ambition like a blade. I don't hate her, not anymore, because I've learned that people like her will always exist. They thrive in systems that reward glitter over grit, but I also know now that I am not someone who needs to compete for a crown in a room that doesn't see me. I don't need to win their games to write my name in bold. My resignation letter still sits in a folder on my desktop, renamed now to something else, proof of fire maybe, or just a reminder that sometimes the loudest power move is a whisper you make people say out loud. The most devastating truths aren't always shouted, they're read slowly in front of a room full of people who can't unhear them. Justice didn't come like thunder, it came like breath, soft and steady like the morning I walked away from that building with nothing in my hands and everything in my future. It came like stillness, like choosing yourself, like setting down the weight of being overlooked and stepping fully into your own light. It came not through punishment but through clarity and the quiet, undeniable knowledge that I never needed a promotion to prove I was worthy, only the strength to walk away from anyone who didn't already know it. And that's what I did. I walked away not with rage but with grace, not because I lost but because I finally saw the difference between being used and being valued, and I will never let myself be mistaken again.